on episode 43 of the Potomac RPG Podcast. Am I to assume I'll be getting overtime pay for this?
Welcome one and all to a very special Valentine's Day edition of the Potomac RPG Podcast, your source for old news, tired conversation, and mediocre advice for all of your favorite tabletop role-playing games. I'm your host and significant other, regaling you with game tales after every single session, Adam.
And I'm your significant other who regrets deploying fart spray into the room where you are now recording, Rachel.
Well, so we have a special guest on the show today. You hear her voice at the top of every show. She's a writer, singer, and wig maker, and someone who also just happens to be the love of my life, Rachel. Welcome to the show, babe, and thanks for being on today.
Aw, I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad to be talking to you over the airwaves instead of just in the room next to this one. So thank you for doing this. I think this will be a fun episode. I mean, every week you have to deal with me sitting at the computer screen for 4 or 5 hours, and then afterwards coming to you and telling you what happened during the session. So how has that been for you?
That's a big question. How has it been? Generally, it's been fine. I mean, it's enjoyable. It's a world I have managed to still know like very little about, other than, you know, our post-game chats. But this year's been interesting because usually I'm gigging on the nights that you're playing. So we kind of swap stories. I tell you gig stories and you tell me D&D stories. But this year, singing at weddings isn't really happening because of, you know, COVID. So I've been home. So it's been a different experience being a couple rooms over from you.
Well, and sometimes on camera as you walk through the room and the entire group gets to see you taking the dog out or yelling at the kids or whatever. So, but it's an interesting experience. And part of what the topic is today, when it comes to tabletop role-playing, especially D&D, it used to be thought of as something played by nerdy teenagers in their mom's basement, but it's evolved so much over the years. Those nerds have grown up and they have relationships and families and still play the game that they love. In our group alone, the majority of us are married or have kids or families. The demographics of the game have changed considerably. And with that comes a segment of people who have no idea what the hell we're doing every week for 4 hours, specifically the non-gaming significant other. So that's what we're going to be talking about this week, the relationship dynamic between the player and a non-player couple. Now, Rach, I've been involved in this group for a while now. When I first got into this, like when I first said that I was going to join a D&D group, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, I think I was definitely excited for you because long before you were even joining this group, you had talked about wanting to join a group. And I remember you said, well, it's just so hard to find people who, you know, will commit to this on a weekly basis. So it seemed like something that might not ever happen. And then when it did happen, it seemed like kind of a surprise. And it worked out well because it was, you know, again, like during the time that I'm usually working. So it's not like it was taking away from our time together. Yeah, I mean, I was just glad for you.
Until now. Quarantine. And now it's taking up all the time. But
yeah, I mean,
it was nice because you would go off and do your gig, and you know, most Saturday nights, you know, I spent on my own and to have a group to kind of eat up that time while doing something that I was really wanting to do. It was nice that it didn't interfere with our relationship at all because it was during that off time.
Yeah, because like without D&D, you would just probably sit crying in a corner, pining for me while waiting for me to return.
During the game. It's really uncomfortable for everybody else, but
right.
yeah, it's All right. Well, hey, let's get into some questions for the week. So,
Okay.
our first post comes from Reddit user Jay Vockler, who asks, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much does your significant other support your involvement in this hobby? My wife is about a 5. She likes that it gets me together with friends, but she just doesn't fully appreciate it, nor does she like the cost of it. I started looking at making my own 2.5D terrain since I am way too cheap to buy my own. When she found out, she went straight to a 1. She said it was crossing the nerd line way too much. So it got me curious what other people's significant others think of their involvement in the hobby. So, how about it, Rach? On a scale of 1 to 10, how supportive of you are you of my involvement in this hobby?
Okay, so I think like it's hard for me to like put it all into one category because I think probably at like a 15 for like I think it's great you do this, and I tell everyone I meet like this is Adam. He plays D
Everyone.
and D,
It's become my identity in your descriptions to others.
and you actually get genuinely like perturbed when you hear me say that, and we'll walk away from someone that we've just introduced. I've introduced you to, and you're like, "Why do you always tell them that first thing about me?" And I'm like, "It's like one of three things that I tell people about you." So I think in that sense, I'm like a 15. I will say now that you're doing things like half the week, like you have two D&D nights and a podcast,
Mhm.
it does like I will say probably I think it puts pressure like if I'm making dinner and we want to eat together as a family, like during the week or something, that puts a little bit of pressure on me to like get things ready because I teach singing during the day and it just like kind of crunches things in a way
Mhm.
that it didn't used to. Um, and so, I mean, it is a big chunk of time. I guess it's funny because you and I are both INFJTs. So I'm like not particularly social. I'm pretty independent. And even between us, you'll be in one room working on kind of your thing, and I'll be in my room working on my thing. And then we come together and share. But I'm glad that you have this social life. And it seems to work really well for you. So I support that completely because doesn't affect what I'm gonna be doing during the same time.
The more I can be away doing my thing and
Yeah.
leaving you alone, the better, right?
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, I could use some help with, like, when the dog needs to go out and stuff, like, that's probably the one thing that, like, bothers me is, like, if I have to take over sort of household duties for those 4 to 5 hours multiple times a week, then I'm like,
sure.
"Ugh."
Yeah, yeah, because it's not as simple as, pausing a game or something like that, or,
Right,
getting up
right.
from your work, like, you're committed to this period of time, and, it's kinda hard to just up and take 10 minutes to deal with household
Resolve
stuff.
something.
And
Yeah,
that's kind of
exactly.
what I want to get into here, because a lot of what this show is about is talking about, D&D culture, tabletop role playing, the different systems, and kind of how much we love this hobby. And what we don't get into much is how it affects those around us, and ways as players we can be a bit more aware of what everyone else is having to do around us whenever we're
Right.
playing games. And I think that's a big key, is that, in my mind, I'm spending at least, 4 to 8 hours a week, doing tabletop. What is a way to make that less burdensome on you?
Well, okay, so I'm gonna take you to task over your math there. So 4 to
Uh-oh.
8 hours. 4 to 8 hours. Okay, the way I see it, it's more so you play 2 steady games a week, and that's
Mhm.
like 4 to 5 hours per at least 4 to 5
Yes.
hours, and
Mhm.
then you do the podcast, which is like an
Yes.
hour or 2. So, okay, now that I've put you in your place with that, can you please repeat the question because I immediately forgot?
Sure. So, if considering the amount of time that I'm putting
Yeah.
into this, what is a way to make it less burdensome on you, the non-gaming
Oh.
other half, to make it so that it isn't a struggle, or isn't so much a pain in the ass? If that makes
I
sense.
mean, yeah. I don't think it's, like, really a struggle. Um, I really don't know what you could do because I'm just sort of used to our flow because it's, back before the pandemic, I was teaching at night, so I was the one who was away the same amount of time, that you're spending playing or doing things involved in this. So it's just kind of like a role reversal or a time reversal. But let's see. If
Yeah, giving you
you
a taste of your
yeah.
own medicine, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. If you could like build a really nice bed
Mhm,
for
mhm,
the
mhm.
dog on like a
Sure.
raised platform so that you could continuously pet her
Mm.
and, whisper sweet nothings into her fuzzy little ears and just keep her occupied for some amount of time
That would
because
do it, huh?
your present setup, she's like not that into like sitting on the hard floor
Yeah.
and she just wants, to be close to you sometimes.
Mhm.
So if you could do that, I think it would help a lot.
Well, let me put it this way. Let's say there was a significant other there out there who wanted to spend time with her partner, and her partner was playing these games. What
Mhm.
what is something that the person could do to ensure that that person doesn't feel left out or ignored or anything like that when it comes to playing games?
I mean, obviously, you've definitely invited me many times to play, and I there are things about it that really, really appeal to me. And the one thing, my attention span is not like I get anxious thinking about anything that takes 5 hours. Like that's a long time for
Hmm.
me, and even and I think the same with like board games that we play, like which I really have enjoyed that. That's something that I never I had Monopoly and I absolutely, like, hated it, and so I just thought games
As you
in
should.
general were just terrible forever. But then you introduced me to some, and I think we've played a few dozen games at this point of your collection, and I've realized that now the games that I absolutely love are the ones that take I always tell you when you bring a new game, I'm like, "Is this going to take less than 5 minutes for you to explain before we can start playing and I could just learn as we go?" Because as soon as you know, start if it's much more complicated than that before you can even start, it's just like looking at, you know, a menu of like random shapes
Yeah.
and colors and being like, "What do you want to eat?" based on this abstract, portrait.
Well,
So
and it is nice that we've been able to share parts of our hobbies together, and specifically when
Mhm.
it comes to games, uh, yeah, D&D can be something that's difficult to get into if you don't have a drive to do it in the first place.
Right.
There are some crossover points that can be hit, but finding things like for us, board games,
Right.
especially hobby board games, that find a way to match those interests a little bit, so you can share something without me having to pester you every week saying, "Hey, you want to play D&D? You want to play D&D?" Sometimes that's just not something that you want to do, right?
Right, right. Yeah, I think like if there were a way to do it with you that were like a really micro session and it could be, those of us in the house so it's not putting that on anyone outside of the house.
Mhm,
And I'll say like I really enjoyed when you were DMing for a spell
mhm.
and we would go for jogs and you would talk through some of your plots and things like that and it's very much like a give and take because as a writer, I'm constantly like forcing you to sit down and listen to me read like the next chapter I wrote or every chapter I wrote. So it's sort of we have that in common and there's so much that crossover with storytelling and writing.
Absolutely. Well, so for those other people out there who have a non-gaming significant other, would curious to see how supportive they are of the hobby. From most of our experiences, especially within the group. It seems the better halves are more than happy that they're playing. So it's really great to see that kind of support, even if they might not quite understand what it's all about. And the sound of Ralphie, the news goblin, can mean only one thing. It's time for Potomac RPG News. So today we have a story from Forbes.com by Rob Weiland titled "Turn Valentine's Day into Game Night with These Tabletop Games." Personally, I can't think of anything more romantic than pulling out a game to play on Valentine's Day, right, babe?
Mm-hmm.
but the article describes some games to play, and interestingly enough, some you've played yourself. What do you think of the rundown of games that are on this list, number one? And number two, should Valentine's Day ever include game night?
Okay. So I'm going to look at the list. Okay. Yes, I'm seeing some that we have played.
Mm-hmm.
As far as this being like a thing to do on Valentine's Day, definitely. I mean, games are fun, and there are totally games that there's a game for every kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
And someone like me who's never played any games really outside of like the really basics, with the right partner who knows sort of good games to kind of introduce you to that.
Yeah.
For me, especially, like, aren't going to take more than an hour to complete. And it helps if it's a game that I win often.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I see Ticket to Ride on here, which we played.
Yeah, that was
a
like the
good
first
bit.
thing, probably.
This is
Yeah,
a
that was
gateway
fun.
game for sure. But down lower, we see Patchwork on here,
I
which was
see.
a great game for two players, and you're basically building a quilt. I think that
Right.
lost favor in your eyes, though, just because of how soundly I beat you over and over again.
Oh, is
And
that so?
that is so. But there's some other ones on here. Obviously, you got the D&D Essentials kit. Really, like that's one of those where that your significant other has to be ready to jump in, but others like Pandemic
Right.
is a classic,
Mm-hmm.
one that's a lot of fun to play. I haven't tried some of these, like the romance trilogy. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't tried that RPG.
What
Some decent
games did
lists.
we play with like Sean and Sheila on our double date game days?
Oh,
What was
there
the
were.
one? Mars,
Oh
Terraforming
yeah,
Mars.
terraforming
Okay.
Mars. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's what's shocking to me so often. Terraforming Mars is a fairly complex game. You know, worker placement slash card. Well, not really worker placement, just like a card based game with a board where you're terraforming Mars and you're trying to get the most points by the end. And I mean, it's a great game, but it's fairly complex, and you were all about it, and that was shocking to me. Like, why a game about, basically colonizing a planet? Why would something like
Right.
that appeal to you?
It definitely wasn't the subject matter. It was something about, I mean, it's fine. That's totally fine. But you know that I like things like aesthetically that have like some sort of cute factor, or like little foxes or some cute little, pieces. The sound is Mabel. She's making her
Yes.
happy grunts.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, as far as like what has been appealing, or what was appealing about that, I'm not even sure, because it reminded me for some reason of that game where it was like the suburbs that we've played a
Oh,
bunch of times.
Suburbia.
Suburbia, like it had a
Yeah.
similar like trying to keep track of a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And I like that game too, but I also like Azul and those kind of games where it's like you can fit a quick one in and just, sort of have fun working your brain a little bit, and you
Yeah.
know,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, there you have it. I mean, there's a bunch of examples of games that you might be able to play with your significant other on Valentine's Day that doesn't necessarily have to be a tabletop RPG. You know, something that's going to take hours to get through. It's a way to share this hobby, since there's a lot of crossover between board games and tabletop. So something to keep in mind. I thought it was a good article. I think Rob's on the right track there in terms of some special things that you can do with your significant other. But for right now,
definitely.
we're going to take a step out, but stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You know, when we were first getting this podcast together, we knew we needed some good music. And we looked into a lot of options that are out there, but we settled on Soundstripe. At soundstripe.com, they have such a wide variety of high quality music to choose from. Every song that you hear on this podcast is from Soundstripe, and we couldn't be happier with what they have to offer. And it's not just music, they have a ton of sound effects and video stock footage as well. So if you're making a podcast or videos on YouTube or have some creative project you're working on, check out Soundstripe. They're worth a look. And right now you can use the promo code Potomac RPG, all one word, and get 10% off. That's Potomac RPG, all one word, to get 10% off your purchase. Elevate your work with the finest stock media all in one place at soundstripe.com. And with that, let's get back to the show. How about another post? This question comes from Reddit user Infinitum3D, who asks, any tips for getting SO interested in D&D? I've been playing and DMing D&D since the early 80s. I've dated girls who enjoy playing with me, and I've lost girlfriends who think I spend too much time doing it. Apparently, Saturday night is always date night. I'm married 20 plus years. And as my kids grew up, I DM'd for them and their friends, and I've always wanted my wife to enjoy the game. She loves board games and card games. She's tried playing D&D with us and really tried to enjoy it. She developed her character and was optimistic and involved in the quest, but a few sessions in, she admitted to me that she wasn't really interested in continuing. I'm not really into playing make-believe, was her explanation. That was a year ago. So we've moved recently, the kids are grown and gone, and I'm wanting to get into a new group, but my wife is my best friend. We do everything together even after 20 plus years of marriage. I don't want to game without her. Does anyone have tales of being in a similar situation and finding out something about playing make-believe that brought their significant other around? Or am I lost? Thanks. All right. So this seems like she's just not that into D&D situation here. But as someone
Right.
I've asked a bunch of times about playing, what's your take on this kind of mindset?
Well, I mean, I understand because there are things that I really like that you just intrinsically hate, that I might have liked to share. But I guess, and I think of myself as like an optimistic pessimist, or the opposite of that, pessimistic
Okay.
optimist. So I kind of think like until the end of that, where he was like, we do everything together, and that was really sweet. But before that, I was like, is it like it's okay? Like maybe she could like go do something she wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than sort of like grinning and bearing, it sounds like it's pretty awesome that she told you like, hey, I gave it a try. I put in my best effort. It's just really not for me. He didn't say anything about her feeling like, I really wish you wouldn't like invest this time. This is our time. So it just seems like he's more enthusiastic about having her along, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe this is some time, some independent time they could have.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it just sounds like, this isn't her thing. And there's
yeah,
nothing wrong with that. Like, don't get me wrong, I understand the desire here. Like I the idea of having the person that you love play the game with you. I mean, we have Steve and Sarah in our group,
right.
that married and love gaming together. And that's awesome to see. And it's certainly something, all of us in the back of our heads think, man, that would be great if my significant other, played this game with me and enjoyed it as much as I do. But that can be said for a bunch of different things. And the fact of the matter is, we all have different tastes, and that's okay. Like, she gave it a
Right.
try. That's huge
That's
that
more
she
than
was.
I did.
Yeah, that's. Well, I wasn't going to say it, but the fact of the matter is, like, she gave it a shot. It wasn't for her,
Right.
and the only thing I could say with regard to this not being a lost cause is that D&D uh, doesn't appeal to everybody, but usually there's a tabletop role playing game system that might. So, for
Right.
example, you, Rach, you're into things like romance and drama and stuff like that. Well, there are TTRPGs that there's no combat whatsoever, that it's about
Right.
investigation or about relationships and stuff like that. So in this case, it might be more a matter of, hey, maybe you haven't found the right game that would appeal to her.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still going too far, or if the guy should just be like, hey, look, she tried and she didn't like it, let me back off. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. Didn't you have, it's not a TTRPG, but it was the computer game or something where it was a guy walking around a place and you were like, just sit down and play this for an hour.
Oh, Disco Elysium. Yeah.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
was cool. I'm not like a video game person, but I thought it was neat. Like I loved the cinematic elements of it. And I
Sure.
got into it. I didn't like walk away thinking like, oh, I gotta have that game. Get my time on the computer with this
Yeah.
character. But I did find it interesting, like what you could do. So yeah, and there are other things you can share. Like I love hearing about the interpersonal side of things. And when you were doing D&D, I was like I'm always like, well, what do they look like before I had met everybody?
Mhm.
And what do they do for a living? And how, just trying to picture what you guys are doing. Um
And that might not be a bad idea from the flip side of this, that for a significant other who might not want to play the game, but still wants to be supportive, one of the best things that you can do is ask about it.
yeah,
If that person is done with the session, ask that person, "Hey, how'd it go? What happened? Tell me about what happened in this session." I mean, most times you don't have a choice; you're going to hear about it, but you know, the more interest you have in hearing about it, that might fill a bit of that void that this person's experiencing, where at
right.
least they can share their experience with their significant other, if that person's not willing or wanting to play.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, there's so many other things. I keep thinking for some reason of like someone who really loves bowling and like their partner really does not like bowling and just, what do you say when you come home from your weekly bowling thing? Like, how was bowling?
I gotta get you down to the lanes. You
Yeah.
just gotta see when you get a strike. Oh, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing.
And I imagine she's like, "Uh-huh. Great."
Yeah.
You know, get you out
that's
of my
that's a
hair
good
for a few
analogy.
hours.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
analogy. I like that a lot. So
Thank you.
so for Infinitum 3D, you know, you're not necessarily lost, but it I think it is important that you recognize where your wife is at. It's great that you do everything together, but it's also great that you have some separate interests as well. There's nothing wrong with that. And what's better, to have her just be supportive of you, or for you to force things and try to make her play without her wanting to? I mean, I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want to force you into something that I knew you hated, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So, well, good luck out there, Infinitum. Hopefully, you find something that works for you guys, and if not, just enjoy playing the game. But let's move on to another segment here. So, even though today's topic isn't all that heavy, it's still nice to take a break and get into some light-hearted stuff. So, listeners, it's time for a palate cleanser. Welcome to the Palate Cleanser. Now, this week I have a challenge for you, Rach. Even though D&D has started to go mainstream, there are more and more celebrities coming out to say that, yes, they play D&D too. So we're going to play a little game of which one plays. I'm going to list 2 celebrities, one of which has been identified publicly as a D&D player. It's your job to pick which one. You ready?
I'm ready, but I should tell you that I do not know like any celebrities' names. So
Well, and that's why I included pictures of all these celebrities. That
Oh.
way you knew
Okay.
who they were. All right. So,
Oh.
see, I know you. We've been together long enough. I know this stuff.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
you ready for question number 1?
I'm ready.
Here it comes. So, question number 1, Jason Biggs or Martin Starr? Martin Starr, you may remember from Freaks and Geeks.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think my first instinct is obviously Martin Starr, but I'm going to go with Jason Biggs because I think you would try to trick me.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. You're incorrect. It was
Ugh,
Martin Starr. You should have gone with your gut. Why would I trick
rude.
you? Why would I trick you
Yeah.
on Valentine's Day of all
Why
days? All
would
right.
you?
Question number 2, Drew Barrymore or Queen Latifah?
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's tough. Well, you know, Drew Barrymore has the ET connection. I identify that with kind of nerd culture, like
Okay.
early seedlings of nerd culture. But like Queen Latifah, she's played a lot of different characters in her time. I'm gonna say I'm gonna go with Drew.
Drew Barrymore is correct. She does play
Woo!
D&D. Well done, baby.
Okay,
Question
okay,
number
thank you.
3, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or Matthew McConaughey?
Oh, ugh. I'm gonna say okay. So Matthew McConaughey, I feel like as an actor, he's like one of those like theater types that's like I'm gonna get into the mind of the character.
Sure, sure.
He probably like lives his life 24/7 while he's playing a character in that character. I think he's all about the character versus Dwayne the Rock Johnson seems like maybe a little more just, I don't know. Like he's probably spending more time working out than Matthew McConaughey.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go with Matthew.
I'm sorry, you're incorrect.
Oh,
It is The Rock. The Rock plays
bummer.
D&D. Yeah,
Okay,
surprising, huh?
okay.
All right,
He
that's
he
all right.
looks but he looks like a little statue from like he looks like a character from D&D. Like he's all big
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
yeah.
Barbarian all the way,
Yes,
no
that's what
doubt.
I was gonna say.
All right,
Yeah.
next question. So 1 out of 3 so far. That's all right. You're doing
Okay.
fine.
Yeah.
Question number 4, Zoe Deschanel or Aubrey Plaza?
Hmm. Hmm. Oh, this is like really hard. I like the work of one of them better than the other.
Okay.
So my sort of like shallow thing is like Zoe would do it so that she could tell everybody she does it because it would be cool.
Mm.
But like Aubrey would just do it.
Well, what do you think?
So I'm gonna go with Zoe because she would want people on podcasts to be talking about it.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're
Oh
incorrect. Aubrey Plaza is
no!
the one who plays D&D.
No!
Oh, man,
No!
only 1 right out of
I
4
know,
so far.
and I exposed that I have this like totally irrational sort of like for Zoe.
Yeah, yeah, I
Sorry,
don't know.
Zoe.
Well, I feel the same way. Well, I mean, between
I don't
those
know.
2, I'd think the same thing, so
Yeah,
that's all
yeah.
right.
Okay.
Question number 5, Stephen Colbert or Jimmy Fallon? Battle late night here.
Oh, well, I know Stephen Colbert is like just really into nerddom of all shapes and sizes.
Mm.
I think Jimmy
Specifically
Fallon,
Lord of the Rings.
yes, he's very Lord of the Rings, but he also like gets down with some other stuff, I think. Or am I confusing him with like Jimmy Kimmel?
I'm not sure.
So
We'll add him to the list too. All 3 of them. Who plays?
okay. I'm gonna say Jimmy Fallon.
Jimmy Fallon does not play. It's
Ah,
Stephen
you're doing this.
Colbert.
You're doing this on purpose. You
I,
knew that
I
I was going to do the opposite of what I thought.
well, stop doing the opposite. Why do you think I would trick you?
I keep doing it. Do I have any more questions left? Is
Yes, you
this
do. You get a couple more. It's almost over.
okay?
Question number
Okay.
6, Will Ferrell or Terry Crews?
Okay. Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell is incorrect. It's Terry Crews who played a
Oh,
D&D celebrity episode thing for charity. So he is the one who
okay.
plays D&D.
I am unfamiliar with his work, to be fair.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
I know you like that show.
I know, but
Yeah.
you don't. But that's
We
okay.
have
But Terry,
just all slightly, it's very hard for you and I to find a show that we both like
it really
enough to
is.
want to watch together.
It really is. It really
Yes.
is. But last question. All right. I have faith in you that you'll get this right. Okay. Here we go. Question number 7. Vin Diesel or Joe Manganiello? Or Manganiello, however you say it.
I've never heard of that person, nor have I ever seen him in my life. He looks like he's on Naked and Afraid.
Uh-huh. He's not, but okay.
Okay. Is he a reality star or like an actor?
No, he's on a bunch of shows.
Okay.
Movies and stuff.
Yeah, I'll go with Joe.
I don't have his IMDb page up or anything,
okay.
but you're going with Joe?
Well, I don't like how you said you're going with Joe. I don't know.
Are you sure that's your final answer?
Fine. Yes.
Joe?
Final answer.
Well, that is correct, but also Vin Diesel would have been correct as well. Both of them play D&D. In fact, I think they played in the same group as well. So yes, both those actors play D&D. So you got 2 out of 7. It's not the best, but it does show that
I don't know who any celebrities are.
You don't know who any celebrities are, but it also shows that can't judge a book by its cover, huh? Like you never know who might be playing this.
Well, I guess, but yes, that is true. You can't judge a book by its cover.
Well, I appreciate you playing, babe. Good job on that.
Thank
but let's
you.
get into our last post of the week. This week's last post comes from Reddit user Blueprint357, who says, "How to explain D&D to a non-geek? Let me start by saying that I love D&D. Other than reading a book, I think it's my favorite pastime activity. Given that, I'm often asked what it is all about by colleagues, friends, significant others, but it's a question I've yet to find a good answer to. What about you? How do you introduce the people you care about to your hobby?" So, with this one, Rachel, you've heard me describe D&D countless times. Did I ever even come close to having it make sense to you?
Well, I've heard you explain it to me, but honestly, I haven't really heard you explain it to other people because every time I say Adam plays D&D, you like run away. So, and nobody asks me what it is, but I guess, do you want me to give a stab?
Do you think you understand? Yeah. What do you, from my description of it to you, what do you think D&D is?
Well, okay. So, it's funny. I said, give a stab. I will kindly give you this stab, sir.
Give me a stab.
Okay. I would say, so it's a group of people who,
you're on the right track,
who are led by a DM who's a dungeon master. And they role play. They have characters that they play that I feel like I should have started a little earlier with something about a campaign. So it's kind of like, I would explain it as like a storyline that can be sort of like a book with chapters, or it can kind of have a start and end, a really clear start and end.
Okay.
And basically that you use dice, and that decisions that you make are sometimes left up to rolling the dice.
Okay. All right.
Is that correct?
Not bad. You're on the right track. I think what it actually proves is that I have not explained things very well at all. but it's difficult because, like you said, the second you manage to bring it up to any random stranger that we meet, I have a tendency to kind of shy back because I'm from the old days, so I'm still not sure how people will react whenever a 41-year-old man says, yes, I play Dungeons and Dragons. So it's there's still a little bit of stigma attached to it yet. And you're on the right track. I would say the only thing on top of that is the dice don't necessarily make your decisions. It's they determine if the decision you made works out or doesn't work out.
Oh, okay,
So you
okay.
can make whatever decisions that you want within the game, and then the DM can decide whether there's
Mm-hmm.
a chance you might fail. And
Can
those
yeah.
failures is what make it fun, because all sorts of
Yeah.
bad stuff happens.
Exactly, like, after games, I'm like, "Did anyone die?" Because I know it doesn't happen that often, but it seems like that's, usually a good story if somebody did
Yeah,
die.
well, it's been happening more often to Ben lately. He's the one who ends
Yeah.
up hurting the most from. He almost died last night, by the way. Yet,
Yeah.
yet another
Oh,
session
no.
that Ben almost lost his character, but he
Yeah,
managed
that's
to hang on.
I mean, I like hearing the stories of the characters, obviously, not the people, if that were the case, but, and I would like to point something out. So I wouldn't say in your perspective, maybe there's still a stigma, but, like, to me, there's not for playing
Mhm.
D&D, which is why I tell people that, because I think it tells them something about you. But I think do you happen to remember, like, before D&D, when you were interested in another hobby and I would tell people about it and you were like, "Why do you tell
Yes,
people that?"
yes.
Do you remember what that
Oh,
activity
yes, I
was?
do. I do, and we're not going to mention it live on a
Paper
podcast.
crafting, paper crafting.
Luckily, I
You
can edit all this stuff out because I have the
you
controls here. But yeah, you do have. Well, you are an accepting person, so whatever I'm doing, you're like, yeah, it's great. It's just that unfortunately, the world isn't full of people like you.
Mm,
So it's still there still is a little bit of insecurity as to what someone might think.
yeah.
And as a Pisces, I have a tendency to try to fit in with whatever group I'm in.
Huh.
So until I discover what that group's all about, I don't like to reveal much about myself. But
Ooh, I
you
think
only,
that's the very first time I've heard you, like, refer to yourself A as a Pisces and
yeah,
also B as, like, some defining characteristic based on your astrological sign. That is
well,
interesting.
we learned something new about each other this Valentine's Day, didn't we?
That's right. That's right. And I'll say, like, so, like, one of my students, she through her school got involved in a D&D group during the pandemic, and, like, I had asked her a while ago. I ask all my students who seem like they might be into it. I'm like, "Have you ever done D&D? Would you ever consider doing it?" Because it seems like such a great thing
Oh yeah.
for people to do, especially right now, to have a
Hmm.
social interaction and have that kind of, like, for some people who might need that barrier. So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
been yeah. I think there's a whole new generation coming up, and they're excited about D&D.
And can't wait for them to get in the hobby. Well, thank you, baby, for being on the show. Really cool to get to talk to you for an hour here, and kind of get what your thoughts were as
Mhm.
someone who has to kind of watch all this stuff happen every week. Really, really interesting insights that you had. I appreciate it. But
Thank
that is going
you.
to do it for us this week. Remember, if you want to send in your questions or anything you find on the internet, you can send them to questions@potomacrpg.com. Check out our store for merch at teespring.com/stores/potomacrpg. And if you'd like to support the Potomac RPG podcast, you can find us on coffee.com/potomacrpg. Lastly, you can follow us at Potomac RPG on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for being on today, Rach. Thank you to the rest of the Potomac RPG crew, and of course, all of our wonderful listeners out there. So, for the Potomac RPG podcast, I'm Adam.
I'm Rachel.
Till next time, keep those dice rolling, keep those stories coming, and
Never stop
living.
playing.
So
Wait, whoa,
let
whoa,
me
whoa,
hit.
whoa, whoa,
Oh,
whoa.
don't close
I,
anything.
I want to practice my voices. You're listening to Potomac RPG. You're listening to Potomac RPG.
You already did that one before.
You're listening to Potomac RPG.
I do like that one.
You're listening to Potomac RPG.
Okay.
You're like listening to like Potomac RPG.
Oh God, please, next.